The fluorescent lights buzzed as Grayson Colehart's phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, finger over decline. After 3 days of silence from his wife, nothing good ever came from surprise calls. His desk, buried in compliance reports, felt like a cruel joke as his personal life fell apart. Mr. Colehart, this is Janet Rodriguez, Tommy's mom from Eli's class. Your son's at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital. They couldn't reach you. Ice flooded his veins, spreading from his chest to his fingertips like liquid nitrogen. The compliance report he'd been reviewing, ironically about safety protocols, blurred as his vision tunneled. What happened? How bad is he hurt? Is he conscious? I don't know the details. Tommy just said there was an ambulance at Rick's place. Paramedics were working on Eli when they loaded him up. Just get there, okay? Room 7 in emergency. And Mr. Colehart, drive carefully. Rick's place, not home, not school. Rick Danner, the warehouse guy Alina called just a helper. For 8 months, he'd hovered like a hunter. Eli flinched at his voice. He stayed over more often while Grayson worked late, always talking about discipline and respect, like a man who'd used his fists before. Grayson's hands shook as he grabbed his keys. Alina should have called first. She was Eli's emergency contact too. His wife of 15 years, HR VP at Sentinel Cybersecurity, his indirect boss. She ran everything, except this. The drive through Denver's evening traffic felt endless. Red lights stretched like torture devices designed by some malevolent traffic engineer. He called Alina 3 times. Each ring went straight to voicemail. Each unanswered call amplified his growing dread until it became a physical ache in his chest. You've reached Alina Colehart, Vice President of Human Resources at Sentinel Cybersecurity. Please leave a detailed message with your full name, department, and nature of inquiry, and I'll return your call within 24 hours. Professional, cold, same voice she used on subordinates who disappointed her. The voice that had once whispered loving promises now reduced to corporate efficiency. Alina, it's me. Eli's in the hospital, emergency room. Call me back immediately. His voice cracked on the last word, revealing desperation he hadn't felt since his father's heart attack 12 years ago. Presbyterian St. Joseph's emergency entrance blazed with harsh lighting that made everything look sick and sterile. Grayson sprinted through automatic doors, badge ready, heart hammering against his ribs hard enough to crack bone. The antiseptic smell hit him like a physical blow, memories of his mother's final days flooding back unbidden. Eli Colehart, he gasped at reception, leaning heavily on the counter. My son, 13 years old. I got a call. The nurse's expression softened with recognition. She was middle-aged, Hispanic, with kind eyes that had seen too much trauma in emergency rooms. Her badge read, Maria Santos. Room 7. Your wife's already here. But sir, there's been some confusion about, where is he? Is he okay? How about down the hall? But sir, there's been some disagreement about visitation rights. Maybe you should speak with the charge nurse first. Grayson was already moving, footsteps echoing off sterile tiles like fire shots in a cathedral. Room 7 appeared ahead like a beacon of terror, and there she was. Alina stood like a sentinel outside the door, designer heels planted wide, arms crossed over her tailored blazer. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled despite the emergency, not a strand out of place. Always the executive, even in crisis, even when their son was broken and bleeding. She saw him coming and stepped directly into his path, blocking the doorway with her body like some corporate Cerberus. You can't go in there, she said, voice carrying that boardroom authority that usually made subordinates shrink and scatter. The hell I can't! He's my son. He doesn't want to see you, Grayson. Her green eyes were ice cold, calculating, already running damage control scenarios. He specifically asked for me. You being here will only upset him more. He's been through enough trauma. Move. He stepped closer, close enough to smell her expensive perfume. Chanel No. 5, mixed with something else. Fierce sweat, barely detectable but unmistakable to someone who'd lived with her for 15 years. No. She planted her feet wider, designer heels clicking on linoleum like period punctuation. You'll make this worse. You always make things worse when you get emotional. Behind Alina, a nurse emerged from room 7, the same one from reception, her scrubs bearing small cartoon characters that seemed obscene in the context of childhood trauma. She looked between them with obvious discomfort, recognizing the tension crackling like electricity before a thunderstorm. Actually, the nurse said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, the patient asked for his father first. We tried calling Mr. Colehart several times before reaching Mrs. Colehart. The boy was very specific about wanting his dad. The color drained from Alina's face like water from a broken dam. That's not... He was confused, traumatized, concussed. He didn't know what he was saying. Ma'am, I was there when he regained consciousness in the ambulance. He specifically asked for Dad 3 times, very clearly. No confusion. Grayson stepped around his wife, but she grabbed his arm with manicured nails that dug through his sleeve like talons designed for corporate warfare. Don't. Her fingernails drew blood through the fabric. You'll make this about you. You always make everything about you instead of focusing on solutions. He shook her off with more force than necessary and pushed into the room. Eli sat on the examination table, legs dangling like a much younger child, hospital gown swimming on his 13-year-old frame. His left eye was swollen completely shut, purple bruising spreading across his cheekbone like spilled ink. Fingerprint bruises marked his upper arms in perfect detail, adult-sized impressions on pale skin that told a story of violent grabbing. Scratches lined his neck in parallel tracks. More bruising peeked from beneath the hospital gown, a constellation of violence mapped across his small body. Dad? Eli's voice came out small, younger than his years, thick with tears and pain medication that made his words slightly slurred. Jesus Christ! Grayson crossed to him in 2 strides, hands hovering like hummingbirds, afraid to touch and cause more pain. What happened? Who did this to you? Tell me everything. Eli's good eye darted toward the door where Alina hovered, her silhouette backlit by harsh corridor lighting like some avenging corporate angel. He leaned forward, whispered so quietly Grayson had to strain to hear over the beeping monitors and distant hospital sounds. It was Rick, Mom's boyfriend. He pushed me down the stairs at his place when I told him to stop yelling at me. The world tilted on its axis. Grayson's vision tunneled, blood roaring in his ears like a freight train carrying 20 years of suppressed rage. Rick Danner, the warehouse contractor Alina claimed was just a work friend. The man who'd been coming around their house for months, fixing things, staying for dinner, making himself at home. The same Rick who made inappropriate comments about discipline and respect whenever Eli showed normal teenage attitude. The man who'd been sleeping in Grayson's bed while he worked late compliance shifts. He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never saw you again, Eli continued, tears streaming down his battered face. He said Mom would choose him over me, over you. He said I was just a mistake anyway, and mistakes could be fixed. Grayson's hands curled into fists, tendons standing out like steel cables under tension. 20 years of corporate compliance, following procedures, staying calm under pressure, diplomatic solutions to workplace conflicts, all of it evaporated like steam from boiling water. He stood, turned toward the door where his wife waited. Alina blocked his path again, but her expression had changed. Gone was the corporate authority. Now she looked genuinely afraid, pupils dilated with fear that had nothing to do with their son's condition. Where are you going? To find Rick? You can't just think about this rationally. If you do something stupid, you'll lose everything. Your job, your reputation, any chance at custody arrangements. Custody? The word came out like a curse, loaded with 15 years of accumulated resentment. Our son is lying there kicking by your boyfriend and you're already thinking about custody arrangements? I'm thinking about our family, about damage control, about keeping this contained. What family? You chose him over us months ago when you started sneaking around. He stepped past her into the hallway, pulling out his phone. His fingers were steady now, purposeful, guided by compliance training that demanded documentation and proper procedures. 911. Denver Police, I need to report a child endangerment incident at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, Room 7. My 13-year-old son was physically damaged by my wife's boyfriend, Rick Danner. Alina's face went white as bone china. She grabbed for his phone with desperate claws. Grayson, hang up. We can handle this privately. Think about the company. Think about what this means for both our careers. The board will... Address is 1375 East 19th Avenue, he continued into the phone, stepping away from her reaching hands. Yes, I'll wait for officers. The perpetrator is Richard Danner, white male, approximately 36 years old. He has keys to our family home and continued unsupervised access to the sufferer. You don't understand what you're doing, Alina hissed, stepping close enough that other people in the corridor couldn't hear. This will destroy everything we've built. Everything. Rick will deny everything, and it becomes a he said, she said situation. Good. Rick will deny everything. It's his word against Eli's. And Eli is just a confused kid who's been through trauma. No jury will. Are you already planning his defense strategy? The question hit like a physical blow. Alina stepped back, realizing what she'd revealed about her priorities. Protecting Rick instead of seeking justice for Eli. The first patrol car arrived within 8 minutes, followed immediately by a second. Officer Martinez, stocky and methodical with kind eyes behind wire-rim glasses, took Eli's statement while a female officer named Thompson photographed his injuries with clinical precision. Each camera flash seemed to illuminate another bruise, another mark of violence, building an irrefutable visual record. Grayson watched his wife's carefully constructed facade crumble like a controlled demolition, as she tried to explain why she hadn't called police herself, why she'd been at Rick's apartment instead of home, why she'd blocked medical personnel from contacting Eli's father. It was an accident, Alina insisted, her voice rising with each repetition like a mantra she hoped would become true through repetition. Rick was helping Eli with his bike in the garage. Boys fall down all the time. You know how clumsy teenagers can be when they're growing. Officer Martinez looked up from his notepad, expression skeptical. Ma'am, these injuries are consistent with forceful contact, not a bicycle accident. The bruising patterns suggest manual trauma, someone grabbing and pushing with significant force. The scratches appear defensive. I want Rick Danner questioned immediately, Grayson said, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his chest. He has keys to our house, unrestricted access to my son, and based on what I'm seeing here, a history of violence that my wife apparently knew about. We'll locate Mr. Danner for questioning, Martinez assured him, making detailed notes. CPS will also need to be notified about potential ongoing endangerment. The acronym hit Alina like a physical blow to the solar plexus, Child Protective Services, her perfect corporate image, her climbing the ladder at Sentinel, her carefully curated social media presence showing the successful executive mother, all of it now under government scrutiny. That's not necessary, she said quickly, desperation creeping into her professional voice. This was an isolated incident, an accident. We can handle this privately through family counseling. Ma'am, anytime a child presents with injuries of this nature, CPS involvement is mandatory, Officer Thompson explained, with bureaucratic patience. Especially when there are concerns about ongoing access by non-parental figures. As the officers finished their reports, Grayson sat beside Eli, holding his uninjured hand. His son looked so small against the white hospital sheets, vulnerable in a way that made Grayson's chest ache with protective fury. I should have told you sooner, Eli whispered, his words slightly slurred from pain medication. About Rick, about what he said to me, about the other times. Other times? The words came out like ice shards. He's grabbed me before, pushed me around when Mom wasn't looking, said I needed to learn respect for the new man of the house. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. He said you wouldn't believe me. That Mom would make sure you never believe me because she needs him more than us. But as Grayson looked at his wife huddled in the corner with her phone, already making damage control calls to her attorney, he knew the real war was just beginning. Alina was already choosing sides, and it wasn't theirs. The emergency room visit was Wednesday night. By Friday morning, Grayson's keycard no longer worked at Sentinel Cybersecurity. He stood in the lobby at 7:45 a.m., coffee growing cold in his hand, watching other employees badge through turnstiles while his card beeped rejection after rejection like a broken alarm clock. 3 attempts, 4, 5. The security guard approached with apologetic recognition. Frank, a former Marine who'd always greeted Grayson with friendly nods. Sir? Is there a problem with your access? My card's not working. Name and department? Grayson Colehart. Compliance, 14th floor. Frank checked his tablet, frowned deeply, then checked again as if hoping the screen would change. You're showing as suspended access effective yesterday evening at 6:47 p.m. You'll need to speak with HR. HR meant Alina, his wife of 15 years now sitting in her corner office on the 15th floor, pulling strings like a puppet master conducting a symphony of corporate revenge. Grayson pocketed his useless badge and walked to the elevator bank, noting how co-workers suddenly found their phones fascinating when he approached. Word traveled fast in corporate environments, especially when it involved executives and police reports. The elevator ride felt like ascending to his own execution, floor by floor, past departments where he'd worked for 8 years, past colleagues who'd trusted his compliance expertise. Now, he was persona non grata, radioactive with scandal. The 14th floor buzzed with usual morning energy, but conversations died as he passed like ripples from a stone thrown in still water. People he'd known for years suddenly developed urgent interest in their computer screens. Alina's assistant, Jennifer, looked uncomfortable as Grayson approached her desk outside the glass-walled executive offices. She was young, maybe 25, with the eager efficiency of someone still climbing corporate ladders and terrified of falling. "She's in a meeting," Jennifer said without looking up from her computer screen, fingers typing furiously at nothing. "No, she's not." He could see through the glass walls. Alina sat alone, typing furiously, probably coordinating damage control with legal counsel and crisis management specialists. He walked past Jennifer's desk and opened the door without knocking, a violation of corporate protocol that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Alina looked up, her expression transitioning from surprise to cold calculation in microseconds, like a computer booting into defense mode. "You can't be here. My keycard's been deactivated. Temporarily suspended pending investigation." She closed her laptop deliberately, the click echoing in the sterile office like a gavel striking wood. Investigation of what? She leaned back in her ergonomic chair, assuming the executive posture that had intimidated countless employees over the years, spine straight, hands folded, chin slightly raised. Compliance protocol violations, breach of confidentiality, use of company resources for personal matters, potential theft of proprietary information. Grayson stared at her, recognizing the corporate speak but barely believing the audacity. "You're destroying my career because I reported your boyfriend for hurting our son. I'm protecting this company from liability exposure." Her voice was pure executive now. No trace of the woman who'd once laughed at his jokes, who'd cried at Eli's. First steps, who'd promised to love and protect their family. Rick Danner was never an employee. Any allegations against him reflect poorly on our background check procedures and create potential legal exposure for Sentinel. He has access to our offices. You gave him that? Prove it. The intercom buzzed, Jennifer's voice carefully neutral and professional. "Mrs. Colehart, security is here." Two guards appeared in the doorway like synchronized corporate enforcers. Grayson recognized them both. Mike Santos and Torres, guys he'd chatted with in the lobby for years about football and weather. Now they looked at him like a threat to corporate security, their friendly familiarity replaced by professional distance. "Escort Mr. Colehart out," Alina said, her voice carrying across the office with executive authority. "He's to surrender his laptop and any company property immediately. Search his personal effects for sensitive documents." The walk to his cubicle felt endless, like a corporate perp walk past silent witnesses. Co-workers stared as he packed personal items into a cardboard box that smelled of copy machine toner. 20 years of compliance work, client relationships, industry knowledge, erased by his wife's signature on termination paperwork. Mike waited patiently as Grayson gathered family photos, his coffee mug with #1dad that Eli had given him 3 Christmases ago, a small cactus that somehow survived despite his complete lack of gardening skills. The laptop stayed behind, locked down by IT and probably being forensically analyzed for any sign of misconduct. "Sorry about this, man," Mike murmured as they walked toward the elevator, his voice low enough that Torres couldn't hear. "Word is you were trying to protect your kid, just doing your job. For what it's worth, most people think this is garbage. Firing a guy for reporting child knocking? That's not right." But Grayson's mind was already working, compliance training kicking in like muscle memory. Compliance officers understood documentation, paper trails, evidence chains. Alina thought she held all the cards, but she'd just made her first mistake. Retaliation against whistleblowers was federally protected activity, and she'd created a perfect timeline linking his firing to his police report. That afternoon, he called Lydia Knox. Lydia was a former federal cyber investigator who'd gone private after exposing corruption in her own department. Mid-40s, sharp as a razor blade, with connections throughout law enforcement and a reputation for taking down corporate criminals who thought they were untouchable. They'd worked together on a financial fraud case 2 years earlier when Sentinel had been investigating potential embezzlement. "Grayson?" Her voice was surprised but pleased. "Thought you were still at Sentinel. Not anymore. I need your help. Professional consultation." They met at a coffee shop in Lodo, away from Sentinel's downtown headquarters and the corporate surveillance culture that had infected their marriage. Lydia listened without interruption as Grayson explained the situation, her expression growing darker with each detail. "Your wife's playing a dangerous game," she said finally, stirring sugar into black coffee with mechanical precision. "Workplace retaliation, child endangerment cover-up. This Rick character, you have his full name, social security number, any documentation?" "Rick Danner claims to be a warehouse logistics contractor. Alina processed his paperwork personally." Lydia made notes on her phone with practiced efficiency. "I'll run a deep background check through federal databases. If he's got priors, especially involving violence, it strengthens your case exponentially." "What about the work situation?" "Document everything. Timeline, emails, witnesses to conversations. Your wife just created a paper trail linking your suspension to your son's incident. That's textbook retaliation that federal prosecutors love." "She's smart, though. She'll have covered her tracks." Lydia smiled grimly, the expression of a hunter who'd found fresh scent. "I'm smarter. Give me 48 hours. The weekend dragged like a prison sentence measured in heartbeats. Eli stayed with Grayson at his brother's apartment, while Alina handled what she called crisis management. CPS had scheduled interviews for Monday. Police were still looking for Rick, who'd apparently disappeared after the hospital incident like smoke and wind. Sunday evening, Lydia called with results that changed everything. "Rick Danner doesn't exist," she said without preamble, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a hunter who'd found her prey. What do you mean?" "The social security number your wife used for his contractor paperwork belongs to a deceased 70-year-old in Florida who died 3 years ago. Rick's real name is Richard Dennison. 3 attack convictions, 2 domestic violence charges, served 18 months in Pueblo Correctional for aggravated menacing." Grayson's grip tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. "Alina hired a violent felon with fake credentials. Gets better. He's been using multiple identities for contractor work across Colorado and Wyoming. Your wife either did zero background checking or she knew and didn't care." "She knew." "Probably. I'm sending you his real criminal record now. Also found something else. Bank records show cash payments from a Sentinel corporate account to various addresses where Richard Dennison has lived over the past 18 months. Your wife's been paying him under the table." The pieces clicked together like a lock opening under the right key. Alina hadn't just been sleeping with Rick. She'd been laundering money through fake contractor payments, corporate fraud to fund her personal relationship with a violent criminal. "I need you to compile a comprehensive report," Grayson said. "Everything. The fake identity, the payments, the criminal history, the timeline. Already started." "But Grayson, this is going nuclear. Are you sure you want to burn it all down?" Through the window, he could see Eli playing video games on the couch, still healing from bruises that were now documented evidence. His 13-year-old son, who'd been threatened into silence by a career criminal his mother had brought into their home. "She made her choice," Grayson said. "Now she lives with the consequences." 3 days later, more devastating evidence emerged. Lydia had traced Rick's movements through credit card records, cell phone data, and surveillance footage. The picture that emerged was of a man conducting business from Sentinel's offices, using corporate resources to coordinate criminal activities. "Your wife wasn't just turning a blind eye. She was orchestrating the whole thing," Lydia explained during their follow-up meeting. She was providing material support to an ongoing criminal enterprise. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected call from Jess O'Reilly, family law attorney. Lydia had recommended her, former prosecutor with a reputation for aggressive custody litigation and corporate whistleblower cases. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to winning. "Mr. Colhart, I've reviewed the preliminary materials your investigator provided. We need to meet immediately." Jess's office occupied the 20th floor of a downtown high-rise, glass walls offering panoramic views of the Rockies. She was younger than expected, early 30s, with silver-streaked black hair and carnivory intensity that reminded Grayson of a hunting cat sizing up prey. "Your wife made several critical errors," she began, spreading documents across her conference table like battle plans. "Workplace retaliation against protected whistleblower activity is federally prosecutable. She fired you for reporting child endangerment. That's a slam-dunk wrongful termination suit worth millions. I care more about protecting my son. We'll do both, but I need you to understand, this becomes total war. Your wife has corporate resources, legal connections, political influence through the company's government contracts. We need overwhelming evidence." Grayson studied the custody petition draft, noting the aggressive language and comprehensive demands. "What kind of evidence?" "Proof that she knowingly exposed your son to danger. Documentation of her relationship with this Richard Dennison character. Evidence she prioritized personal interests over parental duties. Audio, video, recorded conversations. How do we get that? Jessa smiled coldly, revealing perfect carnivore teeth. Very carefully. The surveillance plan unfolded over the following days like a military operation. Grayson moved back into the family home. Alina had been staying at Rick's apartment since the hospital incident. The house felt like a mausoleum. 15 years of marriage reduced to divided belongings and hostile silence. But it also provided access to intelligence. Alina's home office contained financial records, personal computers, correspondence with Sentinel's board of directors. While she was at work, Grayson methodically photographed everything, following evidence chain procedures he'd learned in compliance training. Bank statements showing mysterious cash withdrawals totaling thousands of dollars. Email threads discussing contractor irregularities. Text messages with someone listed as R in her contacts. The jackpot came from her laptop browser history. Alina wasn't tech-savvy despite working at a cybersecurity firm. She reused passwords, saved login credentials, left digital breadcrumbs everywhere like a trail of corporate stupidity. Grayson's compliance background included computer forensics training, skills Alina had apparently forgotten about during their marriage. Her Gmail account revealed the full scope of the cover-up. Email after email coordinating damage control with surgical precision. Messages to Sentinel's general counsel about limiting exposure. Correspondence with a private investigator hired to dig up dirt on Grayson's background. Most damning, a thread with Rick's real email address discussing keeping our stories straight and making sure the kid doesn't talk to anyone else. Grayson saved everything to encrypted drives, following proper evidence chain procedures he'd learned in federal compliance training. But documents wouldn't be enough. Jessa wanted audio, video, real-time evidence of Alina's priorities and decision-making process. She needs to reveal her true character in her own words, the attorney explained during their strategy session. Get her talking about the incident, about Rick, about her plans. Let her hang herself with her own rope. The opportunity came when Alina suggested mediation, a trap disguised as olive branch. We need to discuss this rationally, she said during one of their few phone conversations, her voice carrying false reasonableness. Fighting in court helps no one. Eli needs stability, not more trauma from legal proceedings. They agreed to meet at a neutral location, the conference room of a downtown mediation service. Professional setting, recorded sessions, supposedly confidential. Alina would feel safe being honest about her real priorities. She arrived with Rick. Grayson hadn't seen him since before the hospital incident. Richard Dennison was bigger than expected, 6'2", heavily muscled, with dead eyes and facial scarring that suggested extensive violence. He wore an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the prison tattoos snaking up his hands and neck, like ivy of incarceration. You wanted to talk? Rick said, settling into a chair across from Grayson with carnivore casualness. Let's talk. The mediator, an elderly woman named Patricia Hoffman, explained the process with bureaucratic thoroughness. Everything would be recorded for accuracy and legal protection. All parties had agreed to good faith negotiations seeking resolution. What she didn't know was that Grayson's briefcase contained additional recording equipment. High-definition video camera, professional audio pickup, everything synchronized to cloud storage in real time. I think we can resolve this without involving the courts, Alina began, looking polished and professional in designer clothing that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Eli's been through trauma. He needs both parents working together, not fighting. He needs to be safe, Grayson replied calmly. Rick leaned forward, elbows on the table like a hunter establishing dominance. Kid's fine. Boys get banged up. Part of growing up in the real world. He was terrified. He was being dramatic. Knows how to work the system. Get attention. Rick's voice carried casual dismissal that made Grayson's hands clench under the table. Smart kid, actually. Smarter than his old man, who can't see what's right in front of his face. The insult was calculated, meant to provoke reaction. Grayson stayed calm, letting the recording capture everything. You pushed a 13-year-old downstairs. Accident. Kid was being mouthy, got in my face like he owned the place. I moved him out of the way. He lost balance. Physics. That's not what he told police. Rick's expression hardened, revealing glimpses of prison-hardened violence beneath the expensive suit. Kid's confused, traumatized, like Alina said. Might remember things differently after he's had time to think about consequences. The threat was implicit, but clear as crystal. Grayson kept his expression neutral while internally cataloging every word for the recording. What exactly are you suggesting? he asked. Boys need discipline, structure. Maybe his daddy's been too soft, letting him run wild like some spoiled brat. Alina shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Rick, we discussed keeping this focused on... We discussed me being part of this family, Rick interrupted, voice rising with sudden anger that filled the room like toxic gas. Me having a say in how that kid gets raised. You promised things would change after the divorce. The mediator looked alarmed, recognizing the sudden shift in dynamics. Gentlemen, let's keep this focused on... Shut up, lady. Rick stood, towering over the table like a storm cloud about to break. This is family business, and you don't know anything about family. He turned back to Grayson, leaning forward with hands planted on the table. Your boy needs to learn respect for his mother, for her choices, for me as the new man of the house. And if he doesn't? Rick smiled, and it was genuinely frightening, the expression of someone who'd solved problems with violence for years. Then he learns the hard way, like he did last week when he mouthed off. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Even Alina looked shocked at his casual confession to deliberate violence. Rick, she whispered, you said it was an accident. It was an accident he didn't learn the first time. Won't be an accident if there's a second time. Kids need consequences for their actions. Grayson stood slowly, every movement deliberate. This mediation is over. Sit down, Rick commanded, stepping around the table to block the exit. We're not done talking about arrangements. Yes, we are. Rick moved to block Grayson's path to the door, using his size advantage like he'd probably done in prison. The mediator had already pressed some kind of panic button. Grayson could see security cameras tracking their movement. You walk out and your boy suffers the consequences, Rick said quietly, close enough that Grayson could smell prison soap and barely contained violence. Alina chooses me. Kid lives with us. Accidents happen all the time around clumsy children who don't follow rules. Grayson looked at his wife. 15 years of marriage, and she sat frozen, letting another man threaten their son while she calculated corporate damage control. Last chance, Alina, choose. She looked between them, corporate calculation warring with whatever maternal instinct remained buried under years of executive ambition. We should discuss this privately, she said finally, choosing self-preservation over protection. That was her choice. Preservation of status quo over protection of Eli. Grayson walked around Rick, who was too surprised by the non-confrontation to react immediately. At the door, he turned back. You're right about one thing. There will be consequences for what happened to my son. You threatening me? Rick laughed, the sound carrying genuine amusement. I don't make threats. I file legal documents. That evening, Jessa worked past midnight preparing the emergency custody motion. Temporary restraining order against Rick. Formal allegations of child endangerment. Wrongful termination suit against Sentinel Cybersecurity seeking damages in excess of $5 million. But first, they needed to finish gathering evidence. Lydia's final report landed like a nuclear bomb detonated in corporate boardrooms. Richard Dennison had been on parole when Alina hired him. His parole officer had never been notified of his employment or relationship status, violations that could send him back to prison immediately. The fake contractor payments totaled over $40,000 in fraudulent corporate expenditures. Most devastating, cell phone records showing Rick had been in contact with known associates from his criminal past, using Sentinel's business facilities for meetings. Your wife helped a career criminal establish a new identity and used corporate resources to fund his operation, Lydia explained during their final briefing, spreading surveillance photos across the table. What kind of operation? Still digging, but preliminary indicators suggest identity theft, credit card fraud, possibly pill distribution. Rick's been busy since getting out of prison, using your wife's corporate position as cover. Grayson studied the surveillance photographs of Rick with various men in Sentinel's parking garage, handshakes and briefcase exchanges that looked like pill deals or stolen goods transactions. Are you saying Alina knew? I'm saying a VP of Human Resources doesn't accidentally hire someone with fake credentials and then funnel them $40,000 in unreported cash without asking questions. She knew exactly what she was doing. The pattern was clear. Alina hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been complicit in Rick's criminal enterprises, using her corporate position to provide cover and resources. When Eli became a liability, a witness to Rick's violence, she'd chosen protecting her criminal boyfriend over protecting her son. Time for consequences. The first salvo launched at 8:47 a.m. on Thursday morning like a legal missile strike. Jessa filed the emergency custody petition in Denver Family Court, requesting immediate supervised visitation for Alina and a permanent restraining order against Richard Dennison. The document was 47 pages of legal precision, documenting every aspect of Alina's misconduct with surgical detail. By 9:15, process servers were waiting outside Sentinel Cybersecurity's headquarters, like patient hunters stalking corporate prey. At 9:22, they handed Alina the legal papers in full view of her corporate colleagues in the marble-floored lobby, destroying her carefully maintained professional image with public humiliation. Grayson watched from across the street as his wife read the documents, her face cycling through shock, rage, and desperate calculation, like a computer crashing and rebooting. Within minutes, she was on her phone, pacing like a caged animal in designer heels. By 10:30, Sentinel's board of directors had received an anonymous report detailing every aspect of Alina's misconduct: financial irregularities, hiring violations, criminal associations, all documented with bank records, email evidence, and photographic proof that painted a picture of systematic corruption. At 11:45, Alina was escorted from the building by security guards, her personal belongings in a cardboard box like any other terminated employee. But she wasn't finished fighting. That afternoon, Grayson received a formal termination letter delivered by courier. Not suspension pending investigation, complete employment termination, effective immediately. Cause: gross misconduct, violation of confidentiality agreements, theft of proprietary information, insubordination. Alina had convinced the board that Grayson was the problem. Her position as HR vice president, her years of corporate politics, her insider relationships, all leveraged to paint him as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge through false allegations. "She's good," Jessa admitted when they met that evening in her office. "Turning the board against you before they fully investigate her conduct. Classic corporate misdirection and damage control." "Doesn't matter. We have documentation. Corporate documentation. In a custody hearing, that's secondary to parental fitness evidence." "What do you mean?" Jessa spread out papers across her desk with the efficiency of a battlefield surgeon preparing for amputation. "She's filing counterclaims, alleging you're an unstable, unemployed parent who can't provide for Eli. She's using your job loss as proof of unfitness and emotional instability." The legal chess match was escalating beyond simple custody into total warfare. Alina had accepted the divorce, even encouraged it, but she wanted primary custody. A 13-year-old son was a valuable asset in maintaining her public image, especially with the corporate scrutiny intensifying. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Jessa decided. "Get this in front of a judge before she can establish a narrative." "How long?" 2 weeks if we push emergency procedures." "And Rick? Still missing. But I have a theory about that." Lydia's latest intelligence was disturbing. Richard Dennison had been spotted at Denver International Airport twice in the past week, both times using different identification. Security footage showed him meeting with unknown individuals in baggage claim areas. "He's not running," she explained during their conference call. "He's conducting business, moving product, coordinating operations. Your wife's lover is a full-time criminal using Sentinel as a base of operations." "Can we prove it?" "Working on it. But he's been careful. Multiple identities, encrypted communications, cash transactions that avoid paper trails." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jennifer, Alina's former assistant, contacted Grayson directly. She'd been laid off immediately after Alina's suspension. Collateral damage in the corporate house cleaning designed to eliminate witnesses. "I know what she was doing," Jennifer said during their clandestine meeting at a Starbucks in Aurora, glancing around nervously. "The payments to Rick, the fake contractor records. I processed all the paperwork. Will you testify?" "If you can protect me from retaliation, I have recordings." Jennifer's evidence was damning beyond imagination. Email instructions from Alina to process payments without proper documentation. Directives to bypass background check procedures. Most critically, recorded phone conversations where Alina explicitly acknowledged Rick's violent history. "She said boys needed strong male figures," Jennifer recalled, her voice shaking with remembered fear, "even if they had to learn respect the hard way." She laughed about it like it was funny. The family court hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Judge Patricia Reeves, a 20-year veteran of domestic relations, known for no-nonsense handling of custody disputes and zero tolerance for parental misconduct. Alina arrived with a legal team that cost more than Grayson's annual salary. 3 attorneys, 2 paralegals, briefcases full of character witnesses and psychological evaluations. She'd hired forensic accountants to demonstrate Grayson's financial instability, child psychologists to argue that Eli needed maternal guidance, even private investigators to dig up any personal failings. Grayson had Jessa and the truth. Your Honor, Alina's lead attorney began, a silver-haired man in a $1,000 suit. My client is a successful corporate executive with stable income and community standing. Mr. Colehart is unemployed, potentially unemployable given the circumstances of his termination, and seeking to weaponize their son against his mother. Judge Reeves studied the preliminary filings with experienced eyes that had seen every form of family dysfunction. Miss Riley, your client's position? Your Honor, Mrs. Colehart knowingly exposed her son to a violent criminal, then attempted to cover up that criminal's attack on the child. When her husband reported the incident to protect their son, she destroyed his career in retaliation. Those are serious allegations, supported by extensive documentation and witness testimony. The first day of testimony established the timeline with surgical precision. Hospital records, police reports, CPS interviews, all painting a clear picture of Eli's injuries and his account of events. Eli testified from behind a privacy screen, his young voice steady as he recounted Rick's violence and threats. The bruises had faded, but the psychological impact was evident in every carefully chosen word. He said if I told anyone what really happened, he'd make sure I never saw my dad again, Eli said, his voice carrying the weight of trauma beyond his years. He said my mom would choose him over me because I was just a burden anyway, who cost too much money. Did you believe him? Jessa asked gently. Yes. Mom never told him to stop being mean to me. She just pretended it wasn't happening because she didn't want to lose him. Alina's attorney objected repeatedly, but the damage was clear. A 13-year-old boy had been systematically manipulated and controlled, while his mother allowed it to continue for her own benefit. Day 2 brought financial evidence that painted an even darker picture. Lydia took the stand as an expert witness, walking the court through Rick's fake identity, his criminal history, and the fraudulent payments from Sentinel's corporate accounts. Mrs. Colehart had to know, Lydia testified, consulting her detailed reports. These weren't isolated oversights. They represent a pattern of deliberate deception spanning 18 months and involving multiple felonies. Objection, Alina's attorney interrupted. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Reeves ruled. Please stick to documented facts. The documented facts show $43,000 in payments to a person using falsified identification. Lydia continued. As VP of Human Resources, Mrs. Colehart personally approved each transaction, bypassing standard verification procedures. The afternoon brought character witnesses. Colleagues who'd worked with Grayson for years, neighbors who'd observed his devotion to Eli, teachers who praised his involvement in school activities. Alina's team countered with corporate executives who vouched for her professionalism, charity organizers who highlighted her community involvement, family friends who described her as a devoted mother. But they couldn't produce Rick. Where is Mr. Dennison? Judge Reeves asked during a sidebar conference. My client doesn't know his current whereabouts, Alina's attorney replied with practiced evasion. He's been served with a subpoena, which he's apparently choosing to ignore. Jessa leaned forward like a hunter scenting blood. Your Honor, Mr. Dennison is a convicted felon with multiple identities who's been evading law enforcement since the initial incident. His absence isn't accidental. It's a pattern of criminal behavior that Mrs. Colehart enabled and funded. Day 3 was the showdown that would determine everything. Alina took the stand in her defense, polished and professional in a navy blue suit that projected corporate authority and maternal concern. Her testimony was carefully rehearsed, painting herself as a dedicated mother who'd been deceived by Rick's false identity. I trusted the background check procedures, she testified, voice steady under direct examination. Rick presented proper documentation. I had no reason to suspect criminal history. Mrs. Colehart, Jessa began her cross-examination, approaching the witness stand like a hunting cat stalking wounded prey. You're the VP of Human Resources at a cybersecurity firm. You're telling this court you don't personally verify contractor identities? We follow standard protocols. Standard protocols that you personally modified to bypass verification requirements? Alina hesitated, realizing the trap closing around. Her? That's taken out of context. Jessa produced email printouts like a magician revealing cards. I'm reading from your own correspondence, dated 6 months ago. Jennifer, process Rick's payment immediately. Skip the usual verification steps. I'll take responsibility for any irregularities. That was a direct quote from your corporate email account? Yes, but Mrs. Colehart, When did you first become aware of Mr. Dennison's violent tendencies? Another hesitation, longer this time, as legal training warred with self-preservation. I never saw him act violently toward Eli. That wasn't my question. When did you first become aware of his capacity for violence? I don't understand. Jessa approached the witness stand, voice sharp as a surgical blade. Ma'am, in your relationship with Mr. Dennison, did he ever demonstrate aggressive behavior? Threaten anyone? Discuss his past legal troubles? Objection, Alina's attorney called desperately. Relevance? Goes to knowledge and willful endangerment, Jessa replied coldly. I'll allow it, Judge Reeves decided. Alina looked trapped, glancing toward her legal team for rescue that wasn't coming. Rick could be intense, but never around Eli. Intense how? He had a temper, but lots of people have tempers. Did he ever threaten you? Not seriously. Did he ever threaten your husband? They didn't get along. Mrs. Colehart, yes or no? Did Richard Dennison ever make threats of physical violence in your presence? The courtroom was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the scratching of court reporter keys. Alina's carefully constructed facade finally cracked like ice under pressure. He talked about handling problems, but it was just talk. What kind of problems? People who got in his way. People who didn't understand boundaries. Did he consider your son a problem? Objection. Overruled. Tears started flowing down Alina's cheeks, mascara running in black streams that destroyed her professional image. He said Eli was disrespectful, that he needed stronger discipline. And you agreed? I wanted Eli to adjust to the new situation. The new situation being your relationship with a violent criminal? He wasn't supposed to be violent. The admission echoed through the courtroom, like a fire shot. Alina had known Rick was dangerous, but convinced herself she could control the situation. Mrs. Colehart, when your son was injured, why didn't you immediately call police? I was scared. Scared of what? Rick said if anyone found out what really happened, he'd leave me. I'd lose everything. So you chose protecting your relationship over protecting your son? I never meant... But the damage was done. Alina's own words had convicted her of prioritizing her criminal boyfriend over her child's safety. The final blow came when Jennifer testified about the recorded conversations, playing audio clips where Alina discussed keeping Eli in line and making sure he understood the new family structure. Her voice on the recordings was cold, calculating, completely devoid of maternal concern. When Rick's parole officer testified about the violations that could send him back to prison immediately upon arrest, it became clear that Alina had been harboring a fugitive while placing her son at continued risk. Judge Reeves didn't need long to deliberate. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, Judge Reeves announced Friday morning, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority that had decided thousands of family fates, this court finds clear and convincing evidence that Mrs. Colehart knowingly exposed the minor child to substantial risk of injury. The courtroom was packed with reporters, corporate observers, and family members. Camera flashes popped despite courtroom rules. Alina sat rigid beside her legal team, while Grayson held Eli's hand in the gallery. Mrs. Colehart's conduct demonstrates a pattern of prioritizing personal relationships over parental responsibilities. Her failure to protect the child, combined with active retaliation against the reporting parent, constitutes willful endangerment of the most serious nature. Judge Reeves continued, her words falling like hammer blows on an anvil of justice. Mr. Colehart is granted sole legal and physical custody of the minor child. Mrs. Colehart is awarded supervised visitation, pending completion of court-ordered psychological evaluation and parenting classes. Furthermore, the judge added, delivering the coup de grace, the court recommends immediate criminal investigation into Mrs. Colehart's potential complicity in financial fraud and harboring a fugitive. Alina's face went white as bone china. Her attorneys immediately began whispering about appeals, but the damage was done. The custody ruling was just the beginning of her legal nightmare. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like hungry wolves scenting blood. Mr. Colehart, how do you feel about the ruling? I'm grateful my son is safe, Grayson replied simply, shielding Eli from the cameras with his body. That's all that matters. What about your former wife's business practices? That's for prosecutors to decide. But privately, he knew the criminal investigation would be devastating. Lydia's evidence was already being reviewed by the FBI's white-collar crime division. The corporate fraud charges alone could send Alina to federal prison for decades. 3 weeks later, Richard Dennison was arrested at DIA attempting to board a flight to Mexico under his fourth false identity. He'd been using forged documents, carrying a briefcase full of stolen credit cards and identity documents that represented dozens of sufferers. Under interrogation, he provided details about his operation in exchange for reduced charges. The scope was staggering: identity theft rings spanning multiple states, all coordinated through his relationship with Alina and access to Sentinel's facilities. She knew everything, he told federal investigators during a recorded interview that would destroy her life. The fake IDs, the money laundering, the credit card scams, all of it. Said it was payment for keeping me around, making her feel protected and powerful. Protected from what? Her husband finding out, her company finding out, kid finding out how much she hated playing mommy and housewife. The recordings were damning beyond redemption. Rick's casual confessions revealed Alina as the architect of the entire scheme, using corporate resources to fund criminal enterprise while terrorizing her own son into silence. Sentinel cybersecurity collapsed within 6 months, like a house of cards in a hurricane. The federal investigation uncovered systemic corruption extending beyond Alina's department. Stock prices plummeted as clients canceled contracts and investors fled. Several board members resigned ahead of criminal indictments. The company that had employed Grayson for 8 years became a cautionary tale about corporate governance failures and executive misconduct. Ironically, Grayson was rehired as a federal compliance consultant, helping prosecutors understand the corporate structure that had enabled the crimes. His wrongful termination settlement provided more financial security than years of corporate employment ever had. Alina plea bargained to avoid trial, but even her deal was harsh. 8 years in federal prison for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. 5 additional years of supervised probation, restitution totaling $600,000 to Sentinel's insurance providers and defrauded clients. Asset forfeiture that stripped away her house, car, jewelry, and retirement accounts. She served 4 years before early release for cooperation with ongoing investigations into corporate fraud networks spanning multiple states. Rick wasn't as fortunate. Parole violations sent him back to state prison immediately. Federal charges for identity theft, credit card fraud, and racketeering meant an additional 15-year sentence. The attack on Eli earned him enhanced penalties as a repeat violent offender with a pattern of targeting children. 23 years total, Jessa informed Grayson after the final sentencing. He'll be 70 when he's eligible for parole, assuming he survives prison. Good. The final courthouse confrontation came during Alina's sentencing hearing, a pathetic end to their 15-year marriage. She looked smaller in orange jumpsuit and shackles, her corporate armor stripped away to reveal the broken woman beneath. When given the opportunity to address the court, she turned toward where Grayson sat with Eli. "I made mistakes," she said, voice hollow with defeat. "I was lost. I chose the wrong person, made the wrong decisions." Judge Harrison wasn't sympathetic. "Mrs. Colehart, you weren't lost. You were willing to sacrifice your son's safety to protect your personal interests and criminal enterprise." After sentencing, Alina approached them in the hallway. Her attorney had negotiated one final conversation before she reported to federal custody. "I want to apologize," she said to Eli, her voice breaking with genuine emotion for the first time in years. "To both of you." Eli, now 15 and taller than his mother, studied her face with mature eyes that had seen too much violence and betrayal. "Are you sorry you did it or sorry you got caught?" The question hung between them like a blade suspended over everything they once been as a family. Alina's careful composure finally cracked completely. "I don't know anymore," she whispered. Grayson put his hand on Eli's shoulder. "We need to go." They walked away together, leaving Alina standing alone in the courthouse corridor. Father and son, survivors of her choices, moving forward into whatever came next. The drive home was quiet until Eli spoke. "Do you think she loved us?" Grayson considered the question carefully, wanting to give his son honesty without cruelty. "I think she loved the idea of us, the image we gave her. But when it came to choosing between protecting that image and protecting you, she chose wrong. Are you glad she's gone? I'm glad you're safe." That evening, Grayson cooked dinner while Eli did homework at the kitchen table. Normal sounds, normal rhythms. The house they'd moved to after the divorce was smaller but felt infinitely larger without the tension, the walking on eggshells, the constant calculation of Alina's moods and Rick's threats. His phone buzzed with a text from Lydia. "Final update, Rick's associates all rounded up. Network completely dismantled. Dozens of sufferers getting justice. You did good. He deleted the message and went back to cooking. Later, after Eli was asleep, Grayson sat on the porch looking at Denver's skyline. The city lights stretched endlessly, each one representing someone's life, someone's choices, someone's consequences. A year ago, he'd been a compliance officer in a failing marriage, struggling to protect his son from dangers he couldn't quite name. Now, he was a single father with a consulting business, a healed relationship with Eli, and the satisfaction of seeing justice served to those who'd injured his family. Not revenge, justice.